Hey y'all, welcome to Backbone Homestead. I'm here with my husband George, and he is going to be walking you through basically some maintenance on all of our farm equipment, minus our hand power tools today. This is going to be like our trailers, our tractors, and some of our smaller engine equipment. He does all this kind of stuff. I don't typically do it. I use the equipment, but he does all the maintenance aside from what we actually send into the shop, and he'll have more conversations with you all about that. So it's going to be a pretty rough overview. We'll show you some different things on the equipment, but we're not going to be really getting into the nitty gritty, but at least it'll give you an idea of what to look for when you're trying to maintain your equipment, and then you can kind of refer to your owner's manuals and things for some more in-depth information. So stick around. I'm going to try for the first time to put chapters in this video to make it easier, because I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit longer today. But bear with us, and we will have a part 2, like I said before, for our hand-powered stuff, such as like our
chainsaw, weed whacker, wheelbarrows, pressure washer, hand auger,
just everything we need to get ready for basically the spring, for the spring season. So let's get started.
So this is our zero turn. Each piece of equipment kind of has its own little nuances and things like that we're going to have to walk through and talk about. And you're going to hear me repeat some things several times, so I'm going to treat each piece of equipment like it's the first time I've talked about a piece of equipment today. So with the zero turn, the first thing you do is you do a walk around the entire piece of equipment. You're going to check. So you're look. Normally you can check tire pressures with the gauge. A general press on them. It's not quite the same as a car, but you want to make sure you give a good check. Make sure you've got good pressure in your tires. Getting ready for the season. You have to do this again right before you actually start to use it again when the weather starts to warm up, because of the way air pressures change. But you just want to keep an eye on that throughout the season. We don't have to check our back tires. We do have wheels on ours, so they are airless tires. They're expensive to do, but if you can afford them, they're well worth the money on these guys. And I know Johndeere is talking about doing them on some of the bigger stuff as well. On the backside, there's 2 major things you're going to want to check. The first thing, in this case, is you have an air filter. Air filter, this one looks as fine, probably going to be just blown out. And you have an air tank, something like that. We're just going to blow this out, clean it out, and maybe just a brief wipe down, just get some of the dust and dirt out from inside here. A lot of times they have the little binding right here, and in this case, with this one, you just untwist it, pull it off, and this whole thing's just going to pop right off. And then you just wedge it back on. Sometimes they can be a little tight, but once it's on, you tighten it back down, close this back up, and that's just going to keep the air filter protected from the elements. The next major thing to check over here is going to be your oil. Alright, so good oil checks, you can pull it out, use a rag, clean it off. Put it back in all the way. And then you just pull it right back out, and you want to check. So all of them have a line between full and add. As long as it's between those 2 lines, you're good. If it starts to get close to that add line, make sure that you are refilling appropriately. So this one's fine. That's the second check right here. I want to say this is the transmission oil. And just unscrew that, and that's actually, sorry, that's the oil fill. I apologize. This one does have some transmission oil, but I'm not too worried about checking on this here. It's a brand new tractor, but for us, the oil fills are down there and down there. And that's because with the zero turn, you have 2 drive motors on either side that works independently of each other. Coming around, you're just going to continue your visual check. You want to make sure everything is nice and tight. The next thing, and it's better to check it really from this side, is you want to take a look at your blades. So normally what you're going to do is you're going to crawl underneath. If you can lift it up, somehow lift it up. If not, just kind of lift this little black piece up like this, and just kind of reach your arm on there and look under. And you're just going to check, just do a visual inspection of the blades. Make sure everything is in unison. You don't see any major nicks or dings on them, or the blade might have to get replaced or sharpened. And always make sure you do this with the zero turn completely off. Don't run your zero turn. Have the brakes on. You don't want this thing to shift on you while you're working or looking underneath it. Checking the level of your blades. Some things that are different tools to do it. It just depends on your manufacturer. With this particular model, actually on the back side of it right here, underneath this little wrench, you've actually got a gauge for it that lets you know where your level's at. But again, if you're gonna do this, check your manual, watch a video on it specifically for your model and how to do it. Again, every lawnmower company is gonna be different. Read your owner's manual. And that's going to be the biggest thing. It's going to tell you what type of fluids have to go into it, where they're going to go, how often you should check, when your regularly scheduled maintenance is. So for all these equipment, it's not based on miles, it's based on hours of use or hours on the motor. On this particular model, it's just right here. So this one has its fuel gauge and its hours gauge. So this one's been used for a total of 17.3 hours. This doesn't truly have to go in for a full service till it's about 50. Alright, so the next thing we got are trailers. So we're a little crazy, and we have 3 separate trailers for our property. The first one here is a dump trailer. So again, like before, you can do a quick walk around the entire trailer to identify anything major that stands out. But the big thing is you have to do in-depth, again, picking from one side and consistently working around it. So in the trailers, I like to always start from here, from the front, from the tongue, and you're just gonna do a quick check on certain things. Hey, does your release work? Are all your chains good? Is your cord crimped? This particular one has a battery, a electronic system, and hydraulics. So I'm gonna check in here, make sure there's plenty of fluids to make sure the hydraulics work. I'll do a battery test just to make sure the battery's still sitting good. And then, depending on what's going on, I have a trickle charger that actually works with this system to keep it full as needed. I generally will do a check, make sure that you can at least get a solid pass on your leg to make sure it raises and lowers like it's supposed to. All right, and just keep working our way around. If you have the ability to hook up a vehicle to it and do a light test. So on this particular trailer, we got multiple sets of lights, and you want to make sure that you hook up. And same thing if you're testing your car: left turn, right turn, brake, four-way stop. All of them are important to check. So as you work your way down, make sure all your any attachments, like in this case, this one has drive-up attachments. Are they attached well? Is there any major rust, anything like that might be dangerous? All right, your lugs. Make sure you check the tightness of your lugs. What people don't realize with trailers, cars, tractors, any of that, your lugs over time can come loose. You always want to make sure you do a check on them. Check your manual to see what the appropriate torque is on your lugs for your model. Every one is different. All right, you're also going to look at tread. Just like a car, you can do the penny test. You put the penny in upside down, and if the tread is lower than Abraham Lincoln's head, you need to replace your tires. All right, again, you're going to move around. Check your registration, make sure it hasn't expired since last time you used it. That's happened to us once or twice. This particular one, because it's a dump trailer, does have grease points. And I'll talk about grease points a little bit more when I get to the tractor, but just be aware to check for these little nubs right here. They're pretty universal on the shape of them. Sizes may vary, but we'll talk about that later. Moving around, make sure you have all your cotter pins. So, for example, right here it has a full-size cotter pin, and then back here has a smaller size independent one which keeps the latch. Just take it out, make sure that it properly functions. You want to hit this, make sure everything opens like it's supposed to, closes, and just basically do a full operation. There's a lot of moving parts. This particular trailer will open the doors that way as well as dump, kind of like a dump truck will. So I'm going to raise it up normally, test everything out, make sure there's no normal issues. Normally that's what I would do. We just used this not too long ago, so I'm not going to use time on the video for that. But you just want to make sure you walk through everything and check it for any major issues. Continuing around, you're just going to kind of repeat the steps from the other side over here. So you're going to check your lugs. You're going to look, make sure your cotter pins are in. Check your spare tire. It's important to check the tread on your tire. Give a good solid look over the tire. And the same way you did with these, I'm looking for dry rot as well. So that can, if these sit for long, that can happen over time. Again, and just make sure your lugs are tight, even on your spare, because your spare can fall off. Once you're through all of this, then you're going to go and look underneath. I would not recommend climbing all the way underneath unless you're fully confident it's secured and you have a chalk block underneath both sets of tires to make sure that this can't roll forward or back on you. You don't want this to start moving while you're underneath. That's obviously very dangerous. But you're going to get underneath and you're just looking, making sure there's no wires, hoses, anything like that that might be a risk. Just taking a glance at your springs and make sure your springs are still looking good, aren't overly rusted, as well as the joints on the springs are not overly rusted out. So that's just this particular trailer. We have our other trailer right next to it, our long flatbed trailer. So I'm not going to go over the exact same steps on this one, as most of them are the same. I'm just going to point out some significant points with this trailer. One, you want to make sure you check your lift gates here, so pull them out, and you're gonna take them all the way down, all the way up, make sure they work. I would encourage putting a little bit of lubrication on here, a little bit of oil on the actual bars right here. It just helps keep them makes it a little bit easier for them to slide up and down when you're trying to get set. Always make sure you secure these after checking with the chain, because there's nothing moving and they will open if you hit a big bump on the road. So same thing, you're just checking on all of these to make sure that the decking is good. That's another thing you're looking for on this. Any major rot, anything cracking, overall breaking, anything like that, just to make sure that you don't have to replace any of these boards anytime soon. They are a specific thickness. I want to say they're a true 1.5 inches or 2 inches thick, depending on the company. So your manual should tell you what thickness is if you have to replace these. If not, there are trailer companies out there that will help replace them, fix them, and get them squared away. Moving forward, this trailer, it's the same layout. We've already gone through. We've checked all these. We've looked at the attachments, make sure all the cables are not frayed. Everything is good. We didn't use this one too long ago, so I have already tested the light, so I'm not gonna have to worry about hooking it up. But I'm just kind of doing a general check, making sure everything functions like it's supposed to. I would always encourage and check for these kind of trailers. We have a little tag right here. We have appropriate ratchet straps. I keep the hook up in here. We have a emergency triangle. Just make sure all your equipment in here is good. Nothing's overly frayed or damaged, and overall everything looks good. All right. What goes in here depends on you and depends on what you're using the trailer for, because this one's mainly how we move the tractor to and from the shop or any of our other major vehicles, as well as carrying bigger cargo. We have heavier straps in this one, so check the rating on your straps and make sure they're appropriate for what you're carrying on your trailer. So just moving our way around again, just looking for anything major, checking the tires. Again, we didn't do this one too long ago, and the process for this one's pretty much the same as that dump trailer. A little bit easier because we don't have to worry about any of the dump components themselves. All right, so we're good on this one. Let's go and check our last trailer. This is probably more in line with what a lot of you are going to have, which is just a single axle trailer. So starting on this one, so obviously this has a different pedal hookup than the other one does. So we're going to check, make sure all that functions properly. You check, make sure this moves and it's going to latch appropriately with your given trailer. We had an issue last year where when hooking up, this backed up and actually got pinched right here and snipped several of the wires, so we had to repair it. So I'm just going to inspect my repair, make sure that's still tight and is in good shape.
How did you repair it?
So the way we ended up repairing it is we took the damaged wires, we snipped them, pulled back, and exposed the wire. We used connectors, crimp connectors, and we can show what those look like later. So we crimped it, put them back together, and then we put a shrink wrap over top of it to kind of keep as much of the water out as possible. And so then this one is good to go. So just moving our way around. Again, check all of our lights. This one was actually just brought back. We had a friend use this one, and we used it ourselves just this week. So we already know the lights are all good on this. But just at a visual, we're checking the tires still, again, looking for dry rot. We check the wear on the tires with the using the penny trick. All right, on this one, because you have a fixed drop gate, there's a couple points you want to watch out for that can make these a little difficult. So this particular one is a funny story where we got stuck trying to get a whole bunch of mulch out, and actually I'd have a bobcat help lift us out of the mud that we were stuck in. So unfortunately, the gate on this one had gotten bent. So we have to keep regular eyes on our latches here because these like to stick. You can fix that by putting a little bit of oil on them, occasionally using a wire brush to brush off the little pin right here, or putting some grease on it, whatever the case may be, and it'll make this a little bit easier. So, just like the big flatbed, we're checking the decking, making sure there's no major damage to the decking. Looking at the hinges, make sure you want to see major corrosion on the hinges. There's grease points on these particular hinges on the inside right here. So you'd have to make sure you check those to make sure they're appropriately greased. And again, when I hit the tractor, I'll talk more about how you use the grease points. So coming forward, again, we're visually inspecting. Like the other trailers, we'll look underneath and make sure you don't see anything, any wires hanging, anything dangling, excessive rust, anything along those lines. If you see anything like that, and you're not comfortable enough in yourself to do it, look up. There's a lot of trailer service places or trailer sales places that will also do service. So we have two more major pieces of farming equipment. Our first one is our ride-on mower. This is it can mow. It has our smaller of our ride-on decks, which is nice for getting into certain tight areas. But our biggest use for this one is towing some of the smaller implements, aerator. We have a small dump bucket, a couple of the things that work.
The waterer.
For this, the water as well, yeah. And this one will power the water, everything else. So like the other one, you're gonna pick a side and you're gonna work in the same direction around it. So in this one, just the top lifts off. And this one did just come back from services, so we know the oil's good on it. We already know the fuel filter is good on it. But we'd still, if you hadn't taken this in for services this year, you're gonna do things like you're gonna check the oil right here, to check the fuel filter or the air filter. These brackets pop off, and there's a super clean air filter. Already good to go. And again, always check your owner's manual because there might be certain differences on equipment based on manufacturer, and your owner's manual is going to have the appropriate service requirements for whatever it is you may be working on or working with. We just had our battery replaced this year. This thing didn't run at all last year, so the battery was actually completely dead. We had to pay to replace that. Here's your fuel filter, so just keep an eyes on that. Nice thing with this one being enclosed in comparison to the one on the zero turn is that it's really easy to clean, make sure that that's clean, and there's no major issues with it. All the stuff on this and the zero turn are pretty easy to do yourself. There's tons of YouTube videos out there if you're interested in doing it yourself, or you see something that's off. So working our way around. So this tractor we've had issues with actually the front tire, why it's a separate color. We actually just got the original tire fixed this year with, you can see, several plugs. And we just finally got it cleaned up this year. And we just finally got it to hold air, so this is actually going to go back on. That's going to go back to being our emergency backup tire for these guys. You have John Deere yellow, that came from Home Depot, and it works on these, and generally they'll tell you what tractors they do versus say lawnmowers they do and do not work on. Alright, so moving back, so up here is where your hours are on this thing. So this thing's at 83.9 hours. So it has a few more hours on it than our other one, but not too many more. And so working down on this mower, this is a belt-fed deck, so you should make sure that you have good tension and you have a good work on that it's actually operating the blades. Like the zero turn, you do want to check both the level and the state of your blades on this one. So you just look underneath. Again, if you lift this up or you try and get underneath here at all, always make sure that this thing is blocked and is not able to move. So moving our way around, keep kind of working our way around. We're just kind of checking, inspecting everything, looking for anything that might be off, broken, anything like that might need some additional work. This again coming back from services is in pretty good shape. And that's about it. Always check, again, like the other guys, check the tread on your tires, make sure your tires are in good shape. And that's really about it for this guy. So, now to the fun one, the 3 Series John Deere. Like the others, we'll start kind of from the front to back on this tractor. So in this case, the way it's set up right now, we have the forks in the front. So I guess we'll start with just general, with the forks. You're just going to do a look over on them. The forks themselves actually don't have much that goes into them. It's just more of a general visual, making sure your hooks are still straight and in good shape. If you have to adjust them, right here is a little latch. That's how you're going to push them out or push them in, depending on, which is a process of itself. But just making sure everything functions and works like it's supposed to, and that's really about it. So. This is actually separate. So this is the 320R part of the tractor. So this is what actually the actual lift arms. So this one I would say is a 1,200 pound lift capability on this tractor, which has definitely been very useful. So starting here first, these are the grease points that are on this tractor, and so here's where I'll start talking about what greasing the tractor is actually going to look like. So there's generally 2 different ways of doing it. Way one is a automated system. DeWalt and a couple other companies make a grease gun. It has a little nub on it, everything else, and it's battery powered. You just squeeze a trigger and it greases it for you. Or you can do it by hand. Depending on the type of nibs you have here will depend on the type of attachment. So that's the male attachment, the female attachment that rides on. So what you're gonna do with them, depending on the type you have, you stick the female portion onto the male, and you're going to either pump it if it's a manual or pull the trigger for an automated. And what you're looking for is it's going to fill this whole area space up in here with grease, which keeps us from friction down and keeps us from damaging. When you start to see something about like this start to kind of come out, that's telling you that grease is fully seated inside of the mechanism in here and is actually filled up. So that's kind of what you want to see, something along that lines. Also, you can, depending on some trains of thought, I have been seeing it where people will do this till they start to get the cleaner looking grease like that coming out. That means that all the dirt and grime that may have built up inside that joint has been pushed out of the joint. Once you're done, I would recommend, if you have anything more than about like that, just taking a rag and wiping it off. So nothing too crazy right there on those. Make sure you have your cotter pins here in the front. That's what keeps, at least with the Deeres, that's what keeps your front implement attached to the arms themselves. So moving up from here, we're gonna just look at your hydraulic lines. Don't really have to do much with them. All you're doing is checking, make sure there's no leaks on them. You're gonna check, make sure these aren't frayed, damaged, chewed on. They're just all overall in good shape, and ideally secured in such a way that they're not gonna get kinked or crimped while you're doing work on the tractor. If you have metal lines like you do in here, just glance at them, make sure they all look clean and smooth. If you see a bump in the metal, that means that there might be a fault somewhere in the metal. It happens, some kind of bad material, and that means that line might burst if you actually put it under strain. So just keep that, be aware of that. That happened actually with our last John Deere we had. John Deere replaced it. It was warranted. It wasn't a big deal, but just something to be aware of. Moving forward, check the tires. It treads a little different. So these are not turf tires. They're all-terrain's not the right term for them, but basically you have the higher tread depth in these. So you're gonna glance at them. You want to make sure that you still have a good solid tread depth, so you're not going to get stuck in mud. These will bog down over time, especially here in Georgia. We have Georgia clay, and that likes to stick in these grooves and basically makes these almost like a bald tire. So just check those out. wash them, make sure there's no other major issues with them. Again, and if you look, when I talk about grease points, so these arms, grease point, 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 grease point. So this arm alone on this side has 8 visible grease points. I'm sorry, 9 visible grease points. And I want to say there's a couple further down in here. Most of your owner's manuals, because these actually have their own manual for them, will talk about where all the important grease points are. Read your manuals, read your manuals, read your manuals. Kind of moving back. So with most of these deers, you can't actually read your hours unless they're turned on. When you talk about the bigger ones, well, not the bigger ones, but bigger than this guy. So when you actually start it up, your hours will be read right here. Make sure you check your hours and also read your manuals. It'll tell you when your prescribed service times are. And every tractor is different. So just kind of moving back, I guess we're working our way back. We're just kind of inspecting certain things. Parking brake, is it up and engaged? These things don't have like a brake like you do on the other ones. So you want to make sure that when you pull this up, it engages and disengages. Which, that might be a problem. There it goes, engage. There it goes, that's what I want to see. Alright, so it's just stiff, which happened. But it's important to check. These don't have a parking, they don't have like a park or drive. You turn this thing on, it's in neutral or it's in go. There's no park like you have for a car. So your parking brake, when you're neutral, is what keeps you from rolling wherever you're at on this thing. Now right now, when it's turned off, we've got weight in the rear and weight in the front, so this thing isn't going to move right now during this process. But it's good to keep that out, keep and check that. With these guys, I like to just run through all of the gauges, all the knobs, everything else, just make sure everything flows like it's supposed to, nothing's catching. A lot of it uses linkages, so if it's catching, that means something's loose or too tight, or just comes straight up broken off. So you just got to be aware of that. Check your tires. These tires, so that one is air. These ones we actually don't check for air. These are filled up with what's called beet juice. So beet juice is a specific fluid that goes into these tires and keeps them, basically gives counterbalance. So if I'm lifting anything heavy with the front, keeps the backside of the tractor down where I want it to. And it keeps the tractor also more in the ground, so if I need more traction, it provides it. It does make this tractor significantly heavier. I think we added about 600 pounds to the total weight of the tractor doing that, but it's in the right spot to counterbalance for the front, so it's important. A lot of times you can tell the difference. So on this tire, you see it has the traditional valve cover right here. Now if you look on the back tire, it has this metal valve cover right here to dictate the difference, and that's actually a specific nub that they put on there, an adapter piece to hold in the beet juice and to refill the beet juice as needed. So working to the back side, so on this tractor we have the PTO. You have a PTO like most larger tractors do, or power to object. In any case, this is its own gearbox, has its own areas that you need to check. So you have your fill up here, and you have your dipstick down here. So you need to make sure you check that. It's gonna actually, this one actually tells you use low viscosity, high grade for your oil in this thing. And this thing again just came back from services, so I'm not too worried about where this one sits at. Before I start it up for the season, I will do one last check on it just to make sure there's no leaks and like that. Again, with any of these, you're always looking underneath them too to make sure you don't see any fluid puddling on the ground like you would with the car. On the back here, you do have, so you got your arms. You have where the PTO actually connects in. Always be safe around this, especially when the tractor's on. PTO entanglement is a real thing and it is deadly, so just be careful. But there's an important spot on these that you need to worry about. So where the PTO connects up here and right in here, you should put grease on the shaft where it connects in, and that grease helps keep it lubricated and keeps it from overheating and everything else, seizing, things of that nature. So that is definitely important to check on. Depending on where you're at, make sure your triangle's in good shape, it's clearly reflectable, things like that. Every once in a while we'll put this on the road. We have a gas station a quarter mile down the road, so I can fill it up down there, things like that. It makes it a lot easier. So just be aware of that. And it's important to make sure that it's clearly visible so you don't get into any trouble with the law. Another thing, check your lights, same way you do with the car, with the trailers, or anything else. You have high beams on high beams. You have standard beams on this. You have turn signals, brake lights, everything on this. You want to make sure you check them all. The two implements here we'll cover here in just a minute, so we're just going to kind of go around them, focus on the tractor, and then we'll talk these two implements specifically before we hit the other ones up. So. Again, as you're moving around, you're just checking wires, make sure there's nothing frayed, make sure there's nothing that's disconnected that should be connected. Everything should be capped if it's not currently in use. You just want to check and make sure that everything's connected where it's supposed to. Everything's tied in, has the appropriate caps, there's no frayed wires, and that's really the big focus right here as you're working your way around. And you're going to check everything again. When it comes to this stuff, I do like to just move everything around, make sure everything's flowing and working like it's supposed to. Keep in mind, with tractors like this, even when turned off, this is the control for the arms. If you use these, move them around. If you do anything that's to drop or release pressure, it will do that while the tractor is turned off. So make sure there's no one in front that could potentially be underneath those forks when you go to drop it, because otherwise they're going to be pinned there until you start this tractor up. Okay, beyond that, I'm going to check. I'm going to make sure, the knob here, this is the implement drop right here. I'm going to make sure that's functioning. I'm just going to do a good solid check, make sure all the knobs work, everything else. Now I'll check the steering, everything else when I start it up. I'll do it, check the throttle, forward, back, everything else once I start up. So from here, I'm just kind of looking around, checking any hydraulic lines, looking for any excessive rust, bending or bowing in the lines, fraying, anything of that nature. Again, here's your grease points again, and check up all of those there. Now to pop the hood on these, you generally need something long. So I want a spare Allen wrench I just keep in there. And there's a little hole right here. It has the little icon of the hood of the tractor popping up and a little hole underneath it. Sometimes they're in kind of a tight spot, so just be aware of that. You just gotta stick this in there. So you have a radiator here like you do in a car, so you wanna make sure you check your radiator and make sure that it's appropriately filled up. You have an overflow on the back side and a radiator here. So keep this side clean and in between everything else, because otherwise it can cause the tractor overheat. We had that happen with our 1 series. It kept having seed stuff get in here and like chunks, little bits of cut grass and stuff that actually blocked this up and caused the tractor to overheat. Radiators here on the back side, you have the overflow. It's got your cold and your hot max fill lines. It's pretty self-explanatory on the back of here. And that's just for this particular one. Air filters here. You can pop this latch off, remove the air filter out, check it. Use a air tank to blow it out. Keep it cleaned, so you got good airflow into the tractor itself. One other thing while you're on this side is, so right here there's your oil filter, just making sure that looks clean, or I should say your fuel filter. Make sure that's clean. And then right back here is your dipstick for your oil pan. Just like any other ones, pull it out, clean it off, put it back in, and pull it back out and see what it reads. And it's got the same read fashion as all the other ones do. Right here on this side, this is where your oil for your transfer case, everything is filled up with and checked. There's a dipstick built onto this as well, so just pop it. When it comes to any of these large tractors, there's a lot you can do, but you do have to check the manual, read what it says, and make sure you follow the manufacturer's prescribed remedies or manufacturer's prescribed maintenance process. So let's go take a look at the back. I'll close in a minute. So for our particular tractor, we have two mowing implements. So we have the heavy duty bushhog here, the MX5, and then we actually have a bushhog brand HDTH6. So this we have specifically because this allows us to take down bigger things, up to 3-inch trees. Well, actually, you can actually take down with this. So it's a lot of power here. It's not a toy. Be aware whenever you're operating this, what's around you and who's around you. But like anything else, we're going to go in a circle to check to inspect this. Make sure you have all your cotter pins are all properly in place, and you have all of them. There's a cotter pin on each side right here. There's a cotter pin that holds in here, and there's a cotter pin here and here on the back side, as well as up there where the top mount. Things to be aware of, because this does throw a lot. On both the front and the back, you have a series of chains that just help to try and keep things from flying out. Just make sure you check and make sure you have all of your chains. Gap here and there isn't a big deal, but you have too many gaps, it can't allow things to fly out. Like the front, underneath here is where this actually connects in. Just make sure this is properly lubricated with the same grease you do with anything else. With some of these, like I said, you can put it straight on. Some of you can use a rag to apply. Some you can use use your hand to apply. It really just depends on how you want to do it. The other big thing is your transfer case, which is what transfers the power from the shaft to the actual to the blades themselves, which is right here. Check this. Check your oil. Most of these are 90 weight, but check what it is. This is very important. When I get to the other one, I'll tell a quick story about what happened when you don't do regular maintenance on it and do regular follow-ups. But you need to keep this filled. If this is not appropriately filled, this whole thing can seize, and these are expensive to replace. So, same thing, you got chains along the back here. Just check, make sure all your chains there so you don't have any. It decreases the risk of anything flying out. You got your wheel. It has a couple grease points on it. So just look for the grease points. There should be one here. There's one right here, and you just want to make sure you grease those appropriately. With these, like anything else, you want to periodically inspect the blades. So with most bush hogs, it's basically just a big piece of flat stock, for lack of a better term, that's set up. Some of them will have a cutting edge, some won't. I've seen different variations. With this particular one, you want to check it. You can use the lift to raise the PTO up, but if you're going to go look underneath there or anything like that, put blocks underneath there so that if you lose power, there's an issue, it's not going to drop on you. Also, when you're doing this, do not get underneath there with it turned on. You don't want this thing to kick up, or someone to hit a button and you're underneath there looking at inspecting the blades and all of a sudden kicks on. That's not the place to be. So put blocks on there, keep the tractor off when you're doing it, and check your blades the same way you do with any of these others. So the other piece, the finishing mower we have here, so this one is more for heavy duty stuff, taking down, you can take down small trees, really thick grass, underbrush, things like that. This is more for like a lawn or a field. So what you have to check is a little bit different. So this one has 4 guide wheels. This is actually how you set the height of this deck. Each of the guide wheels has a grease point on the front and the back, on all 4, so make sure you check those. Also on this, as do a lot of these other shafts, there's actually a grease point here at the juncture of the joint. You're going to make sure that that's properly greased. And here's, again, this is also greased. So you can either grease inside of here and then apply it onto the actual shaft, or you can apply it to the base of the male or female side. It doesn't really matter as long as you put some on there. So here is this one's box. So we had an issue with this transfer case. It was cracked, had a small leak, and we didn't check as regular as we needed to, and it actually seized this entire deck up on it. Fortunately, we were under warranty, and because it was a fault and a crack in the case, it was covered. But if we had, it would have cost us roughly $4,000 to fix this deck, and it was a fraction of that, fortunately. So check your transfer cases. So like anyone else, make sure you have all your cotter pins are all in place. With this one, if you take these cotter pins out and lift this up, the entire wheel will pop off, and then you're just going to be dragging with nothing on there, and it can also affect your level. You've got grease points. There's multiple in here. So you have a grease point here. There's one on the opposite side in the same place. And you have a couple right in here. So you can actually access them all from without opening any compartments. It's pretty straightforward. With this one though, you want to open this up. And check. So actually that one's not in. That's okay. I'll have to talk about that.
What's wrong with it?
So there should be a grease point here that's not here.
Mm-hmm.
So I have spares I can screw in here, but there should be a grease point there. This is what carries all this. So same like the other one, you want to make sure that your belt's in good shape. It spins like it's supposed to. You see all these spinning, and you have good tension. You also have a spring up in here. So this spring actually got loose on me before, and we actually fell out of the tractor. I had to go find it, and I had to put a replacement spring in there in the interim. But just keep an eye, make sure you get tension on that, because if you release this spring that's back here, the entire belt comes loose, and that's how you change out your belt. And it has the whole diagram for how everything's supposed to look right here, and how it's supposed to be tensioned and everything else, and how that belt is supposed to run. Like with anything else, read your manuals on them. This one actually keeps the manual right there on it, so it's always close by. But read your manuals on it. It'll make sure to tell you what oils to use, if there's a specific grease this thing wants, type of belts, everything like that. As far as blades, this one uses actually the exact same blades as the lawnmower and the zero turn. So replacing them's easy, but they do dull just as easy, because if you go for something heavy, like if you would with a lawnmower, you will dull your blades. So be aware of that when you check them. And just like that one, you can raise this thing up with the backside of the tractor, or the forks in our case with it. If you do, just make sure it's appropriately secured and won't come loose on you, blocks or whatever the case may be underneath. So that's it for this. We have a couple more implements and a couple more pieces of equipment to talk about. This is our small tow behind 25-gallon water. The thing goes actually behind the right-on mower, right-on tractor. It's actually currently not working. I have to fix a couple more things on it to get it up. But just be aware of things to check on it. Like anything else, you're looking for frayed wires. You're looking for any of these hoses that may have maybe degraded or broken. And you look at your tires, make sure they're not worn down, dry rot or anything like that. You want to check your sprayers in the back, make sure everything folds out like it's supposed to. You know, your hand sprayer works. Everything is where it's supposed to be and working appropriately, like it either did when you purchased it or whatever the case may be. Hopefully once we get this one working this season and up and running, it'll be a big help for us.
We had a visitor. Scalper. Crazy chicken.
So just a small thing to look at. This is our sweeper. So this allows Marie to follow behind after a big mow job and sweep up clippings. This whole thing flips back and it catches the clippings, and Marie can literally carry it here into the chicken run, dump it in there, and the chickens get all the fresh clippings and potentially bugs that they.
It's also really good for composting too.
Yeah. So you're just checking to check the wheels on it. Check the basket. It's kind of gotten caught. There we go. So this just runs straight back. So you're gonna check the basket. No crazy frays. You got a brush right here that is gonna throw everything into that basket. So you're just gonna look at the brush. This one's all powered basically through the power of the wheels. So when the wheels are moving, that brush is moving. So you're just gonna check everything. You know, can you adjust the height and anything else like that? And that's about it for this. We're currently borrowing a blade from one of our friends. This doesn't need a lot of maintenance. It's basically just a giant piece of steel. But there are, other than cotter pins, this is the pin that is going to allow you to adjust the angle. So beyond that, you're just going to make sure that you have appropriate grease in these areas. Anywhere you have metal that turns, you want to make sure it's appropriately greased and good to go. And there's no major rust. Well, damaging or negative rust. I don't know. I mean, obviously this thing has plenty of its own rust. You can see, after I'm sure Marie said the fire this year, we've used all this stuff tons this past season. So this is all going to need a lot of work overall. You have an aerator right here. The biggest thing with this is, you know, you got your tire, you're gonna check your tires.
Which we probably will have to check thoroughly since it seems like the jungle has kind of taken them over.
I can already see one of the tires is already going to need to be replaced on this.
Let's take a look at that so people can see.
You can already see, if you look at that one, it's all got air. This one is lost all its air, so I can try and pump it and reinflate it, but I don't know if it's going to actually work. You can already see it's off the rim. You can also look at all your actual aerators themselves. So they're going to get some rust on them, but you want to make sure that nothing's completely disintegrated or lost rust. The deers are great. This deer though has a slight manufacturing defect that relates to this arm, so that wheel actually likes to cant because of the way everything attaches here. So just things to be aware of. We always have to keep eyes on this particular wheel because of that. We have our mosquito farm over here.
We've talked about the mosquito farm. We probably should be leaving that in the dump position when we're storing it.
The problem is it gets blown over. That's what happens last time with the storm.
Probably need to like set something heavy down in it when.
The biggest thing with this guy is going to be checking your tires. I mean, it's
how are they looking?
They're not deflated. Actually, the tires are looking pretty decent on this one.
That's good.
Which is good. It's a great piece of equipment to have. Gives definitely some increased capability, but there's definitely some things maybe in a later video I'll talk about where I would modify this to make it a little bit better. But yeah, this one's actually in pretty good shape. Just check for any grease points. I don't think this one actually does have any, but it is, anytime you have metal on metal, I highly encourage putting some grease onto it. Next, so we have our auger. So this auger's gotten a lot of love. It's seen better days, but it still works. So the biggest thing is, you know, you're checking for spots. You know, this is what allows it to pivot and everything else. So you want to make sure it's got a little bit of oil or grease on here. Watching for the rust. You want that to seize up on you. Got all the cotter pins. It's all adjustable up in here based on how the size and depth you're going of the equipment, the size of the equipment and the depth you're going. So making sure that you have all the pins and stuff here is important. Don't worry about that.
Is that the manual in that casing? Yeah.
Kept in there. Ours got broke when they had the old 1 series because we had the bar back and it just slammed out on that. So this PTO itself, the shaft is not in the best shape. We're gonna have to probably this season and next do a real good cleanup on it and probably find a way to get it out of the weather. You can see it's got the rust in here, so when it comes to adjusting this and moving this, it actually makes it difficult.
How do we clean it? Like a sandblasting it?
So we're gonna have to probably just a wire brush.
Okay.
And a little bit of oil, and you just kind of brush it and clean it off, and you get this rust off. These will actually, there's actually 2 parts here, because this will actually elongate, like most of the other ones we've seen before. Will actually also do the same thing. So you have to knock this rust off. This will open and close, depending. Normally this shield goes all the way up like that, but this thing's seen, like I said, seen a lot of love, so it doesn't want to stay up. So you want to make sure, because otherwise the 2 sections here will fuse with the rust. It makes it really difficult to get it attached and get it broken free. There are grease points like the other ones up here and down there on the PTO connector. You want to make sure you periodically grease them in the same way. Like the other transfer cases, this does take 90 weight. You want to open this up and check the inside and make sure that it's appropriately lubricated. Beyond that, the only other thing that you have to really watch about on these augers and periodically maintain is going to be the bits themselves. So these bits will actually over time will wear down, and Georgia clay it actually will make it, they will not go anywhere, they won't grip or dig in. So we have to periodically change these out.
Can you sharpen them?
Theoretically you could with a file. I just don't know which was more cost effective, whether it would be to actually change the teeth out or try and file them or grind them down. It just really depends on your budget and your time at that point. Generally you also don't want to do what I just did and put that end down, because that'll get covered up with dirt. If that gets covered with dirt, it's going to make it more difficult to get it attached.
Yeah, about this part that you're holding right now.
Yeah, into the auger. This thing looks like it was sitting upright and had some water in there, so this thing's probably going to need to get cleaned up a bit. But all things being equal, despite all that rust on it, this will still work very well. So that's it for that. The only 2 other pieces of equipment we have over here is the bucket. Generally you don't want to let that water settle in there, so we're going to have to get that water knocked out, because it will cause it to rust and will reduce the life. But there's really not a lot on this you have to watch for. Over time the bite can wear down here, but I mean it'll still dig for quite a bit. If you have one with teeth, your teeth do have to get changed out periodically. The other piece we have is our wire stretcher, which is basically just a big chunk of steel. There's really nothing you have to do with that thing. We modified ours to make it a little bit easier to work, but other than that, there's really nothing to do with that other than having it there and making sure you have all the pins like you do with anything else. So that's it for really the bigger equipment. We'll kind of go into some of the other smaller pieces of equipment we have and go from there. So us being the crazy people that we are, we have multiple push mowers. This one I'm very fond of. Before we got our tractor, I mowed our entire 7 acres with just this little guy.
You can't say the entire 7 acres because we definitely have woods, but you did mow a lot of the fields with that little guy.
It's about that tall.
Yeah, yeah.
So this one did me good.
Walked uphill both ways in the snow.
So
there goes what?
The bowl.
What bowl?
The bowl.
Oh, is it living under the...
hiding underneath there, or living, I don't know.
And hence the January rodent maintenance that's supposed to happen as we talked about things, and obviously the fact that, you know, we've got this place just overrun since the fire. So we definitely have a vole problem here. Whoop, there it goes. Ah, did we catch it? Oh, there it goes again.
There you go.
No, I'm just curious more along the lines of like, trying to get it on the... He's under that lawnmower.
Went back underneath the
Yeah, he did. And there it goes. Behind you, underneath it. Oh! He's right there. He went under the boat.
In the what?
He went under the boat.
Nice.
He ran under the tiller and then he ran under the boat. I gotta figure out, that's something I could have... That's on my list. It said rodent pest control, and I was like, I don't even know where to start with that. But
so
let's do a basic rundown so we don't have to do every single.
No, I'm not. I'm just gonna there's 2 different types, and that's all. So, are you recording?
Yes.
So we have 2 different main types of mowers, though: a 3-wheeled and a 4-wheel. I actually didn't know about the 3-wheel until recently and tried it out. I love it. It's great. But the process with either of them is still essentially the same. First thing you're gonna do, going into the season, this one's gonna need it really good as a good wash. Chickens like to roost underneath there at one point, and so hence the colorful nature of that particular lawnmower. Realistically, these and the tiller that's tucked back in there actually all have about the same maintenance procedures on them. They're all small engines. Each one has a little bit of a different, we'll call it nuance. Read your manual. But the biggest thing with these is, check your oil, which is pretty obvious. It's like most things, it's either yellow, or in this case, it's an orange. And just like any one, you're just gonna twist it off. Pull it out, wipe it clean, dip it back in there, and inspect it. So this one's actually gonna probably be pretty good, but we're gonna have to. I'm gonna do a little bit further check, more thorough check off camera. The other thing with these is you want to check your wheels. A lot of them nowadays don't have actual true. They're like plastic wheels, but they do crack over time. You want to make sure you check all the wheels, make sure they're in good working order, and then you also want to check your level. So this one actually is set lower on the front and higher in the back. Depending on what you're cutting, sometimes that's advantageous, sometimes it's not. Generally, you want to put them all on the same level, and you just got to pull these, and you're going to rotate them, and you're going to move them forward or back to raise or lower the particular piece of equipment. The last thing to check on these, and it depends. Some models need to have there's a fuel filter that you're going to need to check. Actually, let's see where this one's fuel filter is. But you're going to want to check the blades underneath and make sure everything's cleaned out. And then just do a general walkover where you'll see, all these. You got good tension, you got a good pull, and everything functions like it's supposed to. That you get a good spot where you get it gets taut, and you can give it a good yank to get them started up.
Okay.
The biggest thing with the tiller, you got the oil. Same oil on the side right here. You want to make sure you keep checked. You have extra rubber tires on this one, so just check your rubber tires out. And you got to look at the blades underneath, make sure everything's appropriately lubricated, and same thing, just check your cords. That's really about it for these. These guys, what you have to do is not as robust. We're kind of failing a little bit here when you get ours underneath the cover, but we're working towards that. I'm sure there'll be a video of us doing something crazy sometime over the next year or two. So for this stuff, that's about it. I think the next thing we'll talk about is any kind of carried power tools or gas power tools, wheelbarrows, shovels, and things of that nature, and just getting them ready for the season.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully you all know a little bit more about taking care of your equipment and stuff. Like I said, this wasn't supposed to be a super in-depth video. I feel like that could be like 3 hours long if we went into an extreme explanation. But if there's any piece of equipment out here that maybe one of y'all owns that you would like a little more information on, I have no problems with making a separate video that is more in depth, and I'm sure he doesn't mind either. So just let us know below in the comments if you want to see some more in-depth info on a specific piece of equipment. I'm trying to think. Oh, if you haven't been here before, please like and subscribe. We appreciate it, so that we can keep this channel going and kind of support what we have going on here, and hopefully see it kind of grow together.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice shirt.
Yeah, I figured I'd rep my deer.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and check out our other videos, and look forward to that part 2 about the hand tools, and we'll see y'all later. You ready? You want
You want ahead?
Thanks for
There's blooper reel.
for real.